we're gonna hook everything up and we can start distilling. So, what I always like to do is put my lap stand between my heating mantle and my water. So what I do is, remember, here's another little rule by the way, I try not to go too high past this rim of the heating mantle. I want to always have some sort of room in here for things to breathe, right? Especially when you have all this plant matter that's just sitting here. Sometimes, you know, it's starting to simmer, it's heating up, it'll start to pop, like boil over, like it'll just bubble. And you want to give it room, because if not, if you have this completely filled up, well, all your plant material is going to bubble down your condenser and you got to start all over again. It's a mess. So give yourself about 4 or 5, give yourself like 5 inches of room from this edge right here. Not from here, not from here, from right here. All right? Okay. So this is what I like to do. Well, put this bad boy in here, the 3-way adapter. Then what I like to do is get my clamp ready. I open it up ahead of time. Also, these things, you know, when you order it, you receive it, they'll twist off. Just kind of tighten it, just make sure it doesn't get loose, okay? And this is how I'm gonna do this. So you open up this bad boy. And you gotta tweak this around a few times to just get it right. But I like to kind of visualize the fact that this is gonna be my condenser already. So I'm gonna put this forward a little bit, back this up a little bit, raise it up just a tiny bit. You're just kind of predicting where it's gonna be, but you're still gonna have to tweak it. So that's why you want to open it first, and you want to get the condenser in there. And before closing it, just get it in there. And if this, I try to explain this to people. See what I'm doing with my left hand? I'm holding this down, all right? Because you see this right here? You don't want this tilting out. You want it straight up. You don't want to create back pressure anywhere. So, set this up real quick. Drop this down a little bit. All right. It's a good time also to put your clamps on. It'll help keep anything from falling while you're tweaking around with it. Make sure it's there. It's nice and tight. I'm gonna move this up. Move this back. There we go. And then start closing it. So, as I'm putting everything together, I'm constantly monitoring to make sure that everything is in, and that it's straight. It's not leaning, tilting anywhere. So, we got that in there. Got this clamped in. Want to make sure everything's tight, and it is. Next part is to get your heating flask. Usually I would use something a little smaller, but get your vacuum joint ready. Alright. Here you go. Get this bad boy in there gently. There you go. Make sure that it's sealed in. Never let it go unless you have clamps already on it. We're gonna clamp this bad boy down too. And there you go. Here is your basic distillation setup for hydro. Now remember this, how I told you not to screw it all the way? It's because of this. Get your thermometer adapter joint in here. If you look closely at what I'm doing, you will see that what I want is for this thermometer cap, if you come over here, just at the middle of this opening or exit, just there. And then you slowly turn it. Just a little bit. Just tighten it. Alright. And then the final clamp is here. You don't want anything blowing out. So now this is set up. The next step, hoses. So what I'm gonna do first is, it makes life a little easier, I'm gonna fill this up with water. First I'm gonna put ice. I like to use Tupperware and make chunks of ice because they'll melt slower than ice cubes. Your ice cubes are gonna melt in 30 minutes. So if you look in here, I'll show you what I'm about to do. So, you add water. You don't want to add water too much or too little. So I like to get the water just at the level of the pump. See that? It doesn't have to be all the way up because your ice is gonna melt anyway. So now that that's happening, make sure you don't turn it on until you've connected everything. This is really, really, really important, okay? So this is the hose that's coming out of the water pump. So the water pump is gonna suck in water from the cooler and it's gonna pump it out. All right, so the hose that is connected to your water pump is pumping water into the condenser. It's pumping cold water into the condenser, right? So you would think you would want to connect it up here. Oh, by the way, before I forget, you see how this one's pointing up? This is pointing, they're pointing opposite directions. So I forgot to mention this. So ideally, this is how you want to set it up. You can tilt it a little bit depending on where your hose is going to be connecting, but I'll tell you why. So usually, your condenser will have this decanter end, like a wine decanter, and it's so that it just drips out like that. See how it's cut at an angle, it's not straight? Sometimes you'll find cheaper ones that are just flat, but that's why. Now sometimes some condensers will have, one second. Sometimes condensers will be pointed up like this. It's fine. Or they'll be like this. Usually they're like this. So, you're gonna take the hose that's connected to your water pump. I like to put a little bit of water in there. Always hold whatever you're touching, whatever you're grabbing. So I put it there, give it a good little twist. It doesn't have to go all the way in because it's gonna be a pain in the butt to get out later, but you get that. And then, so this is your entry. This will be your exit. So, make your exit. Same thing. All right. Now here's another thing. You need to make sure, so this one's gonna be fine because it's hanging down, but sometimes this one up here can lock like that, can pinch. That's no good, because if you have hot stuff going on and it's not being cooled down, it's not gonna be good. So sometimes I either lean it up against the lab stand itself, or I'll use another lab clamp and I'll just hook it up here. Just to have it there. What I'll do is I'll just give it room so that it doesn't get pinched, but also making sure that I have enough slack with everything going back in here. You need to make sure that this doesn't fly out because then you're just gonna have a mess. So I'm gonna turn it on. Then I'll explain what's gonna happen. Bam. Water comes up here. Oh. Water's coming up here, exiting out here. See that? You always and only want to hook up the water hose from the water pump from the bottom up. Always remember that. Get that shit ingrained in your brain. From the bottom up. Always. Something weird happens where you put it from here down here. It starts to kind of create back pressure. It's not good. And yeah, this is how you want to set it up, all right? So remember, this extra clamp is here so that I don't have to worry about this pinching over, okay? So this is what's happening. So you got the water pump pushing up water, and it's exiting here. So this is gonna keep cooling down as the temperature in the cooler is gonna cool down too. So now we can, before we start anything, make sure, this is what I like to do. I take a joint, I push down, and make sure the clamp is in. Push down gently, make sure the clamp is in. Don't ever use force, you don't need it. Push in, clamp, push in, clamp, push in, clamp. Now, you feel like everything's cool, it's secure, there's no pinches in your hoses. Awesome. So before I get started, I ask myself, is there anything that I need to do that's gonna require me to step away from the lab? If there is, I am going to unplug the vacuum and I will not start distilling unless I am ready to sit here and not move. Unless it's to go to the restroom and back, I do not want to ignore or walk away from my distillation. And it's really important too because it's a reflection of something inside. If you can start this process and walk away from it, that's saying something about you inside. You should be able to sit here, read about alchemy, do whatever you need to do, but don't move from this distillation setup. Also, for safety reasons, do not leave your distillation setup unattended. Don't go to the store, don't do anything. If you have to walk away from it, and you've been distilling for 2 hours, and you know you still have 6 more hours to go, then turn it off, turn everything off, and then do it again when you come back. And set just make sure when you come back that you do the same thing. Make sure there's no leaks with joints being loose or anything. Always use both hands when you're touching the glassware. You don't need to use force or a lot of pressure. It's just to see if there's any wiggle room, and that's it. It's all good. Everything's great. So this is what I like to do. So water boils at about 100 Celsius. And we're gonna speak Celsius because a lot of the stuff that you're gonna come across, even in the alchemical text, it's Celsius. You'll get used to it. So water boils at a little over at 100 Celsius at sea level. And what you're gonna wanna do, which is 212 Fahrenheit, you don't wanna boil the water. What you wanna do is get a nice little simmer. So I like to start around 75, 85 max. I do not go higher than 85, not necessary. It'll take a little longer, but it's fine. Because not only is the water gonna boil and can cause everything to flow over into your receiving flask, but also you're gonna burn your oil. Essential oils are really sensitive to temperature, especially heat. So you don't wanna use high temperatures. You wanna make this really gentle, really subtle. So this is what I like to do. Your heating mantle is most likely gonna have one of these little white markers. So what I like to do is just turn it on. See the light? It's on now. But down here, it won't really do anything. It'll maybe warm up. So this little line right here on my knob, I like to meet it just past that white marker. Once I do that, I'm gonna wait about 40 minutes. I'm gonna check the temperature on the thermometer. Make sure it's not going too high. Just want a gentle little simmer, and you will see your steam coming up. You'll see little droplets forming over here, and you'll start to, it's pretty cool actually, I enjoy watching it. It just starts to condense right here, and you'll see it just flow, and your droplets of water will end up here in your receiving flask. The reason that this little adapter has this joint has a little adapter right here, this vacuum adapter. If you can see inside how this joint, as it curves, it turns to this long little thin glass. That's where your steam, your water, and your essential oil is coming out from. This glass chamber that's around it is actually so that when this starts to fill up with fluid, there's less room for air to be inside of here. That air can escape instead of causing back pressure and kablooey. So, yeah, that's it. So I've got this going. I got it here. In about 40 minutes, I'm gonna check the temperature again. I'm not gonna go anywhere. And I want a nice little simmer. And just give it time. Now, if it's been about 40 minutes and you still don't have a simmer, none at all, then just turning up like this. I literally just do like centimeters. If it's been 40 minutes and I still have no simmer, I just do that. That's it. And that's it. So once this happens, and you have steam coming over, and you have your distillate, that's what it's called, your distillate, because it's been distilled already, in your receiving flask, what you're gonna have here, since it's a hydro distillation, you're gonna have water and your essential oil. So here it will be water or hydrosol and my rosemary essential oil. Once this is done, by the way, and I'll know that this is done when I'm watching little pockets of air happening from this matter right here and not a lot of water is coming over. This is why also you don't want, this is also why you don't want to use high temperatures. You don't want to burn the material, but you'll start to see less water coming over. When that starts to happen, keep monitoring it even more closely and be ready to turn it off. When you do this and you've collected your hydrosol and your essential oil, what you're gonna do is turn everything off. I let this run for maybe 20 more minutes after I've turned everything off because it's still heating and there's still steam coming over. So you want to keep this cool. Another thing, while you're distilling, your ice is gonna melt. You don't want your water to not have ice in it. So what I like to do is when my ice melts and I need more ice, well, you know that ice is now causing the water level to rise. I take a container and I carefully allow the water to start to drain here. I put it somewhere comfortable so it won't fall, and I put in a new chunk of ice in here also. Again, maintaining the water level just at the water pump, not above it or too much below it. So get your new chunk of ice, put it in there. You'll see the water level rise. Don't pass this too much, okay? So I still have ice, so I'm not gonna do anything with that. But that's just a side note. Never let this get warm, because if that gets warm, this is gonna get warm. This is gonna stay hot. That's gonna start getting hot. Yeah. Even though you have this little pressure valve right here, it's too much steam, too much heat will still cause back pressure. But let's say now we're done with our distillation. We have our hydrosol and oil. This is done. What do we do now? Turn this off. Let this run for another like 20-30 minutes, just because this is still gonna keep heating. It's still gonna be hot and steam's gonna still be coming over with oil. So I let this run for about 20 minutes. Then, when everything's cooled down, I can touch this and it's not burning and nothing else is coming over, then I unplug this. When I unplug this, actually I'll just do that now. So I will unplug this, because there's no on or off switch, right? This is what I'll do. The exit hose, I just pick it up and you'll see how it starts to drain. So I'll pick this up. All right. This is how I try to get it off, just like that. That's to the side. That's drained. Now there's still water in your hose, so Pop this out, pinch it. Let that all just sit in there, okay? So this is done. We can put this to the side. The important thing that I forgot to mention that you're gonna need in the lab is, this is called a separatory funnel. This is why you want to get extra clamps too. So this is 1,000 milliliter. I suggest this. This thing is super fragile, especially right here. You can see why. A lot of pressure in this one little area, right? But this is also, this is always gonna be a pain in the butt. I'm always shook every time I clean this. But you wanna make sure that this is tight enough, that it's not loose, but tight enough, but also loose enough that you can move it. That little hole right there should always be facing you before you put any type of fluid in here. If it's not facing you, you're just gonna spill shit everywhere, all right? This is really fragile. You're probably gonna break a few of these because that's just that's the name of the game. So this is what I like to do. Make sure this is secure. Make sure this is secure. And then what I do, let me raise this up a little bit more. All right. That's why I like these clamps too. They grip this very well. So I get a good grip in there. You can see why you want to make sure everything's always clamped down. So here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna take your distillate, all right? Undo this clamp first. See how it comes out. It might be a little stuck since you already used you've been using heat, so pressure builds up. All right, get yourself a funnel. Just pour your entire distillate in there, and this is where it gets really fucking cool. Rosemary essential oil on the top. You're gonna let this sit overnight, and in the morning what you'll do is make sure you have the cap off. Keep this on overnight. Take this off in the morning. Hold it by the stem and just gently start to let it go down. Any bubbles that are on the wall will most likely just end up right back in the batch of oil right there. You'll still have oil sitting there, but as you can see why they call it a separatory funnel. It's keeping the oil and the water separated. Make sure to keep an eye on this so it doesn't overflow. And you'll smell the hydrosol already. You're gonna wanna keep this, but we'll talk about fermentation later. So now that you're getting close to the bottom, start slowing it down. Now what I do is I stop it there. I leave about 1 inch of water there because there's still water up here, and I just leave that alone for like, I leave it alone for maybe half a day. I collect my hydrosol. I put this to the side because I'm gonna use this for the next step, which is fermentation. Look at that beautiful rosemary oil that we got. But again, leave about 1 inch. You'll see a little more water come down to the bottom from the walls, from in here as well. That's cool. So that's your basic distillation setup. We're running out of memory, so we had to film again. I decided, let me just take the actual distillation all the way so that I can ferment this rosemary and not let it go to waste. But yeah, next stop, fermentation. Peace.